G'day and welcome to Kenty Blitz, a brand new podcast dissecting the week's NRL action. My name is Tom Gallup and I'm joined by the show's namesake, Paul Kent. Greatest game of all is well and truly back. A massive weekend. We saw some old faces at new places, some coaches that'll be sweating after 1 week in, and probably the best black eye I've ever seen. Kenty, you did a bit of a roadshow of podcast last week, but I think you're ready to put the tree behind you and talk about some footy. What do you reckon?
Yeah, let's get into it. I'll tell you what, it was a fascinating first round. A lot of people sort of had their opinions reinforced, and I think a few clubs go back this week a bit worried about the season ahead.
Very good. The way this is going to work, we're going to have some quick, high-energy topics. We're going to blast through them. If they get boring, we'll push on. If we get stuck on something, then we'll just stick with it. But let's start right at the top. Parramatta and the Roosters both had 50 points put on them. Been a fair bit written about the fact that if you have 50 points put on you, your season's pretty much done. No one's ever won the grand final after conceding 50. What do you reckon? Are these guys already out?
It's an interesting one. Really interesting because initially, no team in the history of the competition has ever had 50 points put on in round one. You're generally coming back to the competition fit, healthy, and in some state to compete. We not only had one, but we had two. Now, we had one from a team that's just starting a downward spiral as far as people are concerned, the Roosters. A lot of people haven't tipped them for the age. Just reinforced their thinking, didn't it? Parramatta, again, problems. I think both teams have got problems, Tom. I think we've saw out of that already. I know you can put it away. Jason Ryles came out after the Parramatta game and said, look, yeah, disappointing, but it's going to take a while to gel. I've got no doubt it's going to take time to gel. We've seen it happen before. We saw it happen when Cameron Ciraldo took over Canterbury a couple of years back. Took a while to get his team to understand how he wanted to defend. The question for Ryles and Parramatta is how quickly can they turn it around? And can they turn it around before the season is already lost? Because they were awful in defence the other day. They had 41 missed tackles, 44 missed tackles. They were all over the place. They were blown off the park.
I can't believe how many people are saying that the answer or one of the reasons they've lost by 50 is that Mitch Moses is out. I know he's a big leader, but you can't tell me he's stopping a 50-point onslaught in the first half.
He's not going to miss those one-on-one tackles where Parramatta just got completely picked apart. A couple of those early ones were dreadful. Now, let's also remember, Parramatta won the second half, but that's basically because the Storm had put the cue in the rack, okay? And they just said, no, we're done. They lost their concentration a little bit. I think this week, the message out of the Storm, Craig Bellamy would give them all a kick up the backside because his halftime instructions were don't lose concentration and get on with it. The Storm did that. It could have been much worse for Parramatta. There's very little redeeming out of Parramatta. The concern for the Roosters is that Trent Robinson is essentially a defensive coach. His teams have always been built around their defence, yet the Brisbane attack really exposed the edge, particularly Dom Young's edge of the Roosters. I think 5 of the 7 came down that side. They just picked them apart, and the Roosters don't have any sort of upside as far as the players that they're waiting to come back are going to take some time. And so, look, yes, they are down on strength. Unfortunately for them, they started down, but they're going to take time to get back.
It looked to me like they had no answer to Victor Radley going off. Like, for the period that he was on the field, they looked like they had some kind of coherence in both attack and defence. As soon as they lost him, they were all over the place.
Well, Victor did go and start playing on an edge, and this year he's gone from the middle to the edge. And part of that is it's true. They lost that cohesion down that side. They missed him terribly. He's such a great player that he is a big loss to fix. But it's still 50 points. That was a disappointing thing. I just think that the Roosters are really going to go away and have a real hard look at themselves now because they've got to. Where do they go from here? Like, you can't. Victor Radley's not playing this week against Penrith. Where do they go? That's the other thing for the poor old Roosters. They're up against Penrith, who were outstanding in round one. It's going to be a tough one for them.
Chad Townsend's 34, and I think people forget that he hasn't really played consistent footy for 18 months. And being there at the ground on Thursday, I actually think he was underrated, particularly when he was with the Sharks. Yeah. But I don't think he's going to have. I don't think he's going to be the answer for them as the season goes on.
Look, you need support around him. The problem for the Roosters was essentially that just defensively they just didn't aim up, and Roosters had so much. Broncos had so much speed. The Roosters couldn't handle that. And that's going to be a problem because there are a few teams that got a little bit of speed and toe around the park. And I don't know if the Roosters... Yeah, it's fascinating. The thing about the Roosters, I remember years ago when they won the Comp in 2013, they came out a couple of years later and had a really lean year. I spoke to Trent Robinson after and I said, you're concerned. He wasn't that concerned. And what was happening then, it's a little bit like now, they had salary cap issues back then. And he said to Nick Politis, we can either fix ourselves out of this in 1 year or we can take 3 years. He said, if we do it in 3 years, he said, we're going to finish 5, 6, 7, 8. We won't win a comp, but we won't embarrass ourselves. He said, or we can sit there and we try and fix it in one season and get the salary cap fixed in 1 year. And Nick Politis, being Nick Politis, said straight away, get it done in one season and let's get back competing. They had that one poor season. They finished second last, but they came out the next year and then the year after that, and then suddenly they're back winning grand finals again. So I don't know if that's the situation here. The Roosters certainly won't admit to it. But I wonder, given all the players they've lost from last year, the experience they've lost, I think they've got themselves in a little bit of a situation where they've got a lot of salary cap money up their sleeve at the moment. They might be sort of hanging on to that because what you don't spend in the salary cap this year, you're allowed to use it in the salary cap next year.
They are a team where both their management and their fan base expect results. I mean, they've barely had a lean season in 20 years, but you look at Melbourne and Penrith, and they've been able to kind of regenerate. I think I saw you say last week, I think Penrith only had 4 of the same team that they had in last year's grand final. They took into the 2020 grand final. So they keep losing players, but they managed to stay up there.
Well, the Penrith have been able to do that because their juniors are so strong, and they've been able to sort of just keep filling up from below. Okay, they've really had to go to market, but what they have been able to do very well is when they do go to market, they've been able to cherry pick who they need. Blaze Talangi, for instance, this year they went after him because they lost Luai, and they needed someone they didn't have the 5'8" coming through the club who was ready to play first grade. Now, though, I don't know if the Roosters are in that situation. I think the Roosters unexpectedly lost some players last year. Manu, for example, who they hadn't really anticipated on losing out of their side, so they've got to get out. And rather than, I like the fact they haven't gone out and panic bought and just filled it with someone who's okay. They've basically kept those slots there available for when the right player comes along.
And on the Parramatta side of things, do you reckon Jason Roll's speech yesterday might have been the hardest ever debut halftime speech for an NRL coach?
I can't imagine. I don't think there's ever been a coach. Look, for example, the 46-0 or 46-6 halftime deficit.
I thought it was going to be 100-0 at one point.
Well, it was the second highest halftime score ever put up. Okay, here's poor Jason Rolls, his very first head coaching job. What does he say? To his credit, he came in and he just said, "Look, boys, put it behind us. It's done. We can't change it. Let's go out, put a bit of pride in the jersey, and see how we go." Whether they did that or not, I'm not fully convinced that the second half scoreline was the result of Parramatta finally turning it on. I think the Storm turned it off. That said, though, they did go some way to give them something to bounce from this week in preparation for this weekend's game. So, but poor old Jason Ross. What must he have been thinking on that walk down to the dressing room? What goes through his head?
Against his old club too. He knows Melbourne well.
And he would know exactly what the Storm are capable of in the second half if they came out switched on.
I saw Harry Grant was good enough to back Jason Rolls after the game on Fox, but far out, he'd be pretty nervous going into this week. If Dylan Brown was an ASX stock, he was obviously pretty high last week, but off the back of that drubbing, what do you reckon he's worth now?
Yeah, look, Joey Johns came out last year and said straight away, last week, and said that Dylan Brown's not worth the 1.3 that Newcastle are looking to offer him. I believe the other club, the second club that are in the market after Dylan Brown is the Auckland Warriors, that they'd like to bring him back to New Zealand. As we know, he came over to play for Parramatta when he was a teenager. He's not worth 1.3 million. And if he was going to be worth 1.3 million, forget the defensive errors. That's not all on him. But what you wanted to see out of him was his kicking game and his leadership. And we didn't see that. If you're paying $1.3 million for a half in this competition, they have to be the one, particularly when you're getting drubbed like that, they have to kick you out of trouble. And Parramatta didn't even put up an inkling of that. So it shows he's still he's very talented, no doubt about that. He's still a long way from the finished product, though. And to say 1.3 top-end money, you don't pay top-end money unless you're getting top-end results.
Well, I thought the Knights' young halves played better than Dylan Brown this weekend.
Yeah, well, there's an argument for them to keep them there and let them see how they develop, isn't there?
Definitely. Talking about defence quickly, you mentioned Parramatta had 41 missed tackles. The Tigers missed 51, and Benji was quite staunch in his defence of their defence. How did you see that? Yeah,
it's a funny one, isn't it? Look, the disappointing thing I think for Tigers, they only lost 10-8, okay? 2 points. But they had the most missed tackles of any team in the competition over the weekend. And Benji came out before the game saying, look, our priority is just to get our defence right. That's the concern. If that's your priority and that's the response, then there's a little bit of work to go. That said, they're scrambled. The fact that they held Newcastle with that many missed tackles to 10 points shows that their scramble's pretty good. Their energy in defence is good. But energy and scramble, they're high output areas. And if you're continuing to miss that many tackles, eventually it's got to come and tell on you. So it's a bit of a wait and see, I think, for the Tigers. Wait and see whether they can fix that defence and get those more one-on-ones and get them actually achieving what they need to do there, or whether they sit there and they go, you know what, okay, we need to, re-establish our defensive mindset, our line, and figure out what's going wrong here. At the moment, it's not. It clearly didn't work, but it kind of did. That's the weird thing. It kind of did. It's a hard read, but 51's far too many. They've
brought Jerome Luai in, who's obviously a proven winner, and they keep talking about the fact that he's going to teach him how to win. And Penrith have been magnificent in defence now for 7-8 years, but he's not one of Penrith's best defensive players. So he won't have brought that over to the Tigers. They're going to have to find it somewhere else.
Yeah, but what he does, though, understand, Tom, is he understands how defence works, and he understands how, look, clearly when the Panthers are sitting there and they're learning their defensive systems, he's not the guy they look at, but he's sitting there listening to it and he understands it, and he understands how it works. You could argue slightly that the fact that only 10 points were scored, there's already some green shoots there, that something is working in the Tigers' defence.
I mean, Benji wasn't a great defender himself.
Well, yeah, he wasn't known for it. Let's say that. He wasn't known for it. But look, again, he wasn't, he wasn't targeted overly either. Like, he was essentially only targeted like most 5'8" are. I don't think it's panic stations for the Tigers. And I think there were some good signs there, but I do think 51's too high, and that's the first thing he's going to be working on this week. Wayne Bennett always thinks if you can get through a game and average about 16 to 18 missed tackles, then you got your defence in tip-top order. Well, they're 3 times that. So that's what they need to improve.
In that game, I know you had a bit of a bone to pick with the linesman. Ball was clearly knocked from Dane Gagai's hands and nothing was done about it.
I call linesmen spectators without eyes, okay? I don't know what they are doing. The amount of forward passes they miss and the other things, that's their job. That's their job to do. Dane Gagai they'd used their challenge. They couldn't argue. It was already gone. But Dane Gagai had clearly the ball knocked from his hands. Everybody saw it except for 3 people. The 2 linesmen and the referee. I just don't know how it happens. I don't know why we know that the bunker sits there and has a little whisper in the referee's ear about foul play. Why can't he just say, mate, you got that wrong? Turn it round. They have done that before. They don't do it now. They have done that before. I don't know why they couldn't do that.
I saw you asking a few questions on a podcast last week, but it's certainly good to see you back answering the questions because that was some vintage Paul Kent right there. Let's talk about the table quickly. I think the best 3 teams, Penrith, the Broncos, and obviously Melbourne, they really stood out and they made a point this week. Are we looking at a pretty lopsided comp this year? Are those 3 going to really pull away from the pack?
Yeah, it's hard to pull away from the pack, but I tell you, already it's a competition within 3, and I think once you sort of get out of the disappointing thing about the NRL at the moment is it's the same teams that are competing all the time for the premierships, and it's gone beyond just they've got the current group of good players. You understand it when there's for example, this Penrith crew that all came through together, which was Crichton and Luai and Cleary and they all pretty much emerged at the same time. But a few of them aren't there anymore. They've moved on to other clubs. Penrith have been able to go out and re-establish with other players or are in the process of doing that. But they're still the dominant team along with Melbourne and Brisbane are on their way back, okay? And Brisbane have got great young kids coming through. The turnaround and it just doesn't happen. You see in the NFL, for example, the amount of teams that hit Super Bowls each year, it changes constantly. They'll sit there and you will have your players.
And even the AFL more close to home, they've done a good job. I mean, Richmond were the best team 5 years ago, and they're touted to come last this year. But they'll rebuild because they've got a lot of good young players. The NRL doesn't seem to have sorted that out.
Well, the dirty little secret in the NRL, which no one wants to talk about, is the third parties and influence they're having and how the Saracat's been controlled. it's up for non-discussion at the NRL. They just don't want to hear about it. But that's what's got to be fixed. And as the game gets bigger, we're going to go to a Papua New Guinea team. Okay, we're going to have more players. We're going to have a broader pool to be drawing on. They want to get to their 19 and 20 games. I saw Neil Breen talk about it in the Herald.
Not only talking about PNG, they're talking about Perth Bears in the next 10 years as well.
If the NRL doesn't get the salary cap under control, and as I've said, one of the major reasons for the salary cap is to try and spread the talent. It's clearly not being spread. Clearly not being spread. And teams, the successful teams are doing that because they've got third-party advantages. It's not. Look, I don't mind the idea of having champion teams. I think people want to watch Penrith play. They want to watch Melbourne play. I like that idea. But it's also not achievable. The problem is if
no one likes seeing the Storm do to Parramatta yesterday in the first half. I mean, most people turn that off.
The thing it's round one. You cop that in round 18 when a team's just decimated with injuries. Okay, but we already saw the Roosters go and ask for dispensation to play people outside their salary cap because they've been so hammered with injuries in round one. It's just got to be fixed. It's got to be sorted out where they've just got to say, you know what, we need to sort of come up with a greater control here. I don't know whether we put a cap on third parties. There certainly needs to be disclosure on what clubs are spending on third parties.
What is the disclosure at the moment?
Well, it's bullshit at the moment. They don't tell you. They every time I've asked the NRL, they come back with these compressed figures. Okay, of what so it's like the top clubs are spending this much and the bottom clubs are spending this much, but the NRL say, oh shit, we can't get that out. Let's just push it down like this, and they just compress it up so it doesn't look that bad. It's bullshit. So you can't believe it when it happens, okay? But it serves a purpose for them, but ultimately it's not going to serve the purpose for the game. I think you cannot have, particularly expansion teams, who are coming in and are going to struggle to get off the bottom of the ladder.
I mean, if Dylan Brown's getting offered, 1.3 mil a year, where are the halfbacks coming for these two new teams?
Well, that's exactly it. Well, that comes down to junior development coaches. You've got to get rid of all the wannabe Jack Gibsons in junior football who sit there and play coach's power game. Okay, want to win the comp.
Sorry, can you say that again? The wannabe Jack Gibsons.
Yeah. So they want to coach his power game. They want to walk back to the club and pump their chest and say, we won the under-18s premiership. No one gives a shit. Your job as an under-18s coach at a development at an NRL club is to develop players to play first grade. But unfortunately, the reason we got the game's dominated by fullbacks now because halfbacks, all the football's been taken out of halfbacks. They've just been turned into robots. And it's not until you see someone like Nathan Cleary who's so well coached that he's been able to sort of step out of that robotic program and then sort of really develop into the player we need him to be. There's too much robotic paint by numbers coaching in junior footy, particularly in the halves, and we're losing our creativity from it.
In the 8 games this weekend, 5 of the fullbacks were the leading Dally M medal point getters.
Case closed. That's exactly it. And look, it's great to see. Okay, it's like the fullbacks are exciting the way they play the game, and what I like about the fullbacks, they've all got different games. Tom Trbojevic is much different from
Kalen Ponga.
Kalen Ponga, different type of game. The halfbacks are all playing the same. They're all trying to play the same because they're all trying to coach the same. They need to change that theory and that background in them so they can turn into...
If you take Jai Gray, Turbo, and Ponga, you couldn't have 3 more different body types, yet they were all the Dally M. They got the most Dally M points for their winning team on the weekend.
Well, you go back, Tom, 20 years. The 2 best halfbacks in the competition were Alan Langer and Ricky Stewart. Completely different styles. To the point where if you took Alan Langer out of Brisbane and put him in that Canberra team, and you took Ricky Stewart vice versa, it's hard to see how they would still be as successful because both those teams, their identity was built around the way the halfbacks played. Okay, obviously they had champion players around them as well, but their whole playing style, Ricky Stewart with the wide pass, Alan Langer take the ball to line, turn the ball inside, short pass, completely different styles. But the teams were able, both coaches were able to build the playing style around how those halves played. Today, they're all trying to turn the halfbacks into the same player. Doesn't matter what club they are. Doesn't matter what other assets they've got around them.
Yeah, there's a lot of wannabe Nathan Clearys out there at the moment.
That's what they're all trying to turn them into. We need some coaching in the game.
Right, we've talked about front runners, but what about some of these contenders? I think the Dogs were pretty good on the weekend. Manly looked pretty good. The Sharks were disappointing against Penrith in Vegas, but which of these teams that are chasing the pack do you think might be there in September?
Look, depends what happens at Manly. Manly have got weapons everywhere, but they are so tied to Tom Trbojevich's hamstrings that seriously, aren't they?
Yeah.
So that they are so attached to his hamstrings that if it goes ping at round 12, then they could be in some trouble. But if Manly stay healthy,
If they stay Trbojevic injury-free.
yeah, but also stay uncomplicated. Manly are turning into a power game. They've got such tremendous forwards. The worst thing I think you can do at Manly is, not for me to tell Seabold how to coach, but just to overcoach them. Don't do that. Just let them play this power game where they just punch through, and then you've got the creativity of Cherry Evans and Trbojevic once the ball goes wide. But I like Manly. Cronulla, they'll get better. They still need that little bit of spark in their side that's just going to take them from 4 points behind to 2 points ahead. They've got a little bit of that, but who, when there's 3 minutes to go and you need to try, who do you throw the ball to at Cronulla? It was going to be Nico Hines. It hasn't been him so far. It wasn't him last year. So he's that. Canterbury just getting better. I still think they're probably a season away or two away from really contending.
But they looked bloody good. They were fast. They were physical. And the Dragons weren't bad either, but the Bulldogs just kept coming. And I think if it hadn't been so hot, they probably would have beaten them by more.
Yeah, they could have. Yeah. I thought before the game St. George Illawarra were a pretty good prospect to win the game. But they came out, the Bulldogs, and really got into it. They're an example of a team that's rebuilding very, very well. I think Phil Gould has shown them how to best capitalise on third-party arrangements to try and get the players in that we need. And lo and behold, they've suddenly started to attract a few players who are expensive on the market, but they're getting the results for it.
Say what you like about Gus. If you look Roosters early 2000s and then kind of Penrith and the Dogs, each club that he's gone to, it's taken a bit of time, but he's built good football teams.
Because he knows how it works, Tom. He knows how and some clubs don't know how it works. Some clubs are still trying to figure it out.
I saw that him and Politis have broken bread.
Yeah, well, be interesting to see how long.
Speaking of Politis, a lot of talk today about him and Burris in America with the ref.
Yeah, slow news day. Honestly, if it wasn't Nick Politis and Mark Burris, it wouldn't be a story at all. It was a nines tournament in Vegas. It was the Vegas Nines. And
did you know any player in that tournament?
Did anyone? Did anyone? Did you even know the tournament was on? Nobody knew the tournament was on. Look, again, slow news day. The fact that it was Burris and Politis is what made it a story. They've denied they abused him. I think it's clear that they probably did question some of his decisions. I had a look today at the video of it. It's a pretty scratchy video. Someone's just filmed it from their film. But they're both getting penalised an average of every 2 minutes as a penalty against them. So I can understand there's a little bit of complaint to go on with.
You know they got the ref taken off the Greek game later that day.
well, good luck. It was probably a reward for him to be taken off that game.
The other big story today, Taylor May has been acquitted, or the police have said that there's no further case to press, and PVL has come out immediately and said that pending it all being wrapped up, he will be available to be picked up by another NRL team. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's another nail in the coffin for this no fault stand down policy. Look, the reason it came in was back in 2018, 2019, the summer of, there was, I think, between September and February, there's like 16 or 17 offences that embarrassed the NRL, and finally they got sick of it and they called in the commission and they came up with this decision, which everyone thought was a good decision. It just slowed everything down. But I think it's been a failure, and I think it's actually harmful. It's not harmful for the game, but it is harmful for the careers of players. Taylor May was sacked over this. He just signed a contract extension. He was sacked over this.
It was a $3 million extension.
$3 million extension. And look, this is a delicate one for me, okay, because I've been through similar. I think the game needs to be very careful of having this impact on players' careers when it's the allegation of just one person. It's not like there's been a full-blown investigation into this. It's generally the police are now so knee-jerk with having to force charges on people. And I get it. I empathise with the police, okay? I get the pressure they're under, okay? And it is a delicate one. But by the same token, I think the NRL need to be a little bit more subjective with it. They need to put a little bit more effort into their own investigations, and they need to. I think it needs to be a case by case. This blanket policy is not working. Jack DeBellin lost 3 years of his career for an allegation that was eventually dismissed. Okay, and he's never. And at the time, Peter V'landys came out and said, "Well, because he's not playing, it's going to actually extend his career because he's not getting the wear and tear of playing every week." But he's never come back the same player. He was stood down as an Origin player, and he's come back as a player who can't get within cooee of Origin now. It's cost him his Origin career, his representative career. And let me just reinforce this, for eventually case dismissed, okay? Different story if they're guilty, but the NRL, the strike rate of guilt people found guilty against not guilty is quite small. And that's the concern. And it's too easy for the NRL, I think, to just say, you know what, stand them down. And I think it's too damaging on the players' careers to stand them down. Like I said, Taylor May's lost a year of football and a $3 million contract out of this. We've seen a lot of other players. Brandon Wakeham's just come back to the game. He was stood down, no charges to answer in the end. There's a lot of this going on. They need to readdress this. They need to sit there and have an understanding of where the impact it's having on, I think, on the players. They will argue about the sponsorship, the fact that sponsors are walking away from the game. I get the argument. I get the concern. I get that it's a bad look. But it's also part of what's going on in life at the moment. As far as, and I'm saying this, I'm not in any way trying to okay all the allegations, but it's you've just got to be able to just roll on. You can't just sit there and just bring people's careers to a halt on an allegation. It could take 12 months before it's actually verified, and that's the concern. Look, this is a whole other issue for the game. It's going to be a touchy one for the game. It's a touchy one to talk about. But we need to get to a situation where we go, you know what, we need to start looking at this a little bit more closely and understand the impact it's having on people.
Another hardline policy the NRL have got is the no punch rule. You get sent to the bin if you throw a punch, but apparently you can pull hair and walk away with it. What happened with Jack Bird on the weekend? Fair income.
No idea. Look, he got away with one, I think. They said they looked at it. A hair pull. They said that, you know what, he got away with one. Good luck to him.
27 minutes. We said we're going to keep it under half an hour. We've been action-packed there. Kenty, it's good to have you back answering the questions on big, hard topics.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Very good, mate.